Welcome back, everyone, to the Human Role. So we are now on to our episode where we're going to talk about women in tech, and then also, in case you guys don't know, we're going to also talk about a platform, Niural, that Nami Baral, who is our special guest today, is overseeing. She's created this from scratch. Nami is actually on her third, not one, not two, but third startup. So I'm really excited to have her on. She has a plethora of background in the tech space. Really excited also that, she's a woman like me, like many of us listening in. And so she has exceeded all barriers and is continuing to grow and push through on the tech side for us. So really glad to have you on, Nami. Thanks so much for being willing to join this podcast, because I know we're going to get into a lot of great topics, but this is a much needed and much necessary topic for us to discuss with my population.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm excited to, obviously chat about all things about being a woman in tech and, building an HR platform that puts people at the center of it.
So let's get started maybe first on just your background, your extensive background on the tech space, how you got to this space. Of course, in just a moment, we want to at least talk about her new platform, because it is heavily, I would say, like AI-based, but also focused on like the global workforce management space, payments, compliance and so forth, which is really good for us. We always need that in the HR and payroll space. But Nami, I'm going to let you have the floor and give maybe some more details on how you got started from one startup to two startups to now three startups. And then from there, we can get into your newest platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nami Baral, founder and CEO of Niural. Niural is an all-in-one HR platform that helps you hire, manage, and pay your workforce anywhere, anyone in the world, right? So we have a full platform that offers US payroll, both done through your own entities as well as under a PEO structure, benefits, insurance, and everything that you need to take care of your, US-based workforce, as well as international contractor management and employer of record services in 150 countries around the world. In addition to that, we also help employers handle their account receivables and account payables through our platform itself. So we work with the entire C-suite, from general counsels to CEOs, CFOs, as well as chief people officers and CHROs, as our platform is able to help them across all of these different things. Like you had mentioned earlier, this is my third company. And the two companies that I had started prior, I have been in the tech ecosystem for a really long time. My first company was, one of the original inventors of real-time negotiation in mobile technology, right when the mobile app ecosystem was emerging. And with that company got acquired by Twitter very, very early, even when, Twitter itself was a relatively small company pre-IPO. So my journey started there with that company that ended up being acquired by Twitter. And then, eventually I was leading a global team for revenue and partnerships at Twitter. Then after doing that for some time, right, I felt like I wanted to kind of get back into the startup game again. And in 2018, I decided to leave Twitter to start my previous company, Harvest, which was, these days, I think a lot of people understand the concept of AI super agents. But at that time, we were building it all from scratch, right? So Harvest was one of the original builders of an AI super agent that could do financial negotiations. So imagine any kind of negotiations with your financial institution like Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, around your mortgages, your credit cards, your overdraft fees. All of those financial conversations could be done by our AI without any human in the loop, and it would automate that entire action itself, right? So not just telling the user how, what they have in terms of their debt profile or what needs to be negotiated, but actually completing the negotiation entirely using AI. That was what we built at my last company. And so that company also became really, really successful, especially as this kind of wave of AI has, kind of become more bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And so that company, we also, experienced a really great exit through a sale to Acorns in early 2021. And then since then, I have been building Neural. And so a lot of the times when people talk to me about, okay, you have already have all of these successes, why did you decide to go and build a third company? But then even more importantly, we've been in really, really kind of big hype industries like, kind of big data, AI, fintech in general. Why did you choose the payroll and HR space to build, right? And that honestly it is one of the most kind of unrealized opportunities, kind of untapped potential that lies in this ecosystem, because a lot of people tend to think of payroll and HR as just a necessity that they need to get through, versus really thinking about what is the most important capital a company always has. Obviously, there's monetary capital, but the brain capital that somebody has is honestly the most important superpower for any company. The companies that exist in this ecosystem or have existed as leaders in the payroll and HR ecosystem for some time tend to be companies that started, the same time as the, end of the Second World War, for example, right? So, very, very antiquated dinosaur-esque companies that did not have the infrastructure or technology or even the intent to really disrupt how you take care of human beings, rather than just process payroll as numbers or just look at HR as a statistical thing about how to take care of a certain resource, versus thinking about it as the most important kind of capital your company has, right? So with that mindset, I decided to, obviously build Neural, and it is one of the most impactful things that I think I would have built up until now. And it's been a heck of a journey. Very, very exciting.
Yeah. So thank you. Kudos for you saying all of that, only because how cool is it to know that your HCM platform also links to the accounting side of things? So I swear, like years and years ago, way before you started your company, but just so many years ago, it was like that was always a struggle. What were we going to use for, the HCM, HRES platform, and how was it going to connect? And then, you're adding in so many different integrations. So someone was going to have to lose out on something, right? So I feel like even with that, Neural has solved that usability, right, for all across all departments, which is really, really important. We got to make it more seamless. But then your last point was really, really great, because I've said it a couple of times on some past episodes. Payroll is always looked at as like the redheaded stepchild a little bit. It's like just no one wants to like touch it. And then, from an HR stand, sometimes it is really hard to actually see that HR really needs to be there for that human aspect for the employee population. So anything we can do to make our lives better on this side of the house is really good, but then also to show value. And so it seems like your system has pulled all of that together. And then even for you to say that you feel like Neural is the most challenging, but at least most beneficial compared to your prior AI work in a time where all we're hearing about is AI and a lot of people are worried about it taking over their job. I think that's really important because I'm always stressing to just anyone that I manage, any colleagues that are calling me, at this point, we all need to be a little more strategic. And so I'm not saying that our jobs will go away. I don't think we really know that, because we're still so new with AI, but it's a possibility, right? Just like everything. And it's really to a point now where we need to be more strategic, and we don't need to run from AI. We need to figure out what AI is doing so we can help, right? As these bots are going in, I'm sure you probably have interesting stories. You had to build that out, and you had to put in how it spits out, right? There's still a human element of what it spits out, essentially, to certain things. So I like that type of stuff. I know some people like to stay in their bubble, but I like that type of stuff, a type of challenge. Yeah. But it seems like you have a full suite of things that you've accomplished within your three businesses. And so
Hey, everybody. Got a quick question for you. Is your job easy, stress-free, and full of rainbows and sunshine every single day? Yeah, I'd say that's a big fat no. Hi, I'm David Noe, host of Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners, and proud to be part of the Work-Defined community. Take a step down into my Speakeasy live on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we tackle HR and business challenges through raw, uncut, unfiltered conversations. This is HR like you've never heard it before. Bold, real, and full of practical takeaways. Real guests, bold insights, authentic conversations that drive change. Catch every episode on demand through your favorite podcast platform or all the content at speakeasyhr.com.
Are correct, I would say. I mean, some may say I'm biased, but wholeheartedly, I feel like you are correct. It's like we touch literally every person in the business, right? You know, you can't mess up someone's pay because you may never hear from this person, but the minute they're short a couple cents or, or they feel like their tax has been too high, then you're going to get questioned. So it is really just such a critical field. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue to push through and people will continue to keep their eyes open that it is important to not just have HR, but also, payroll in your space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is such a critical component for every business, right? And we tend to have this idea of payroll and, not just payroll, but the HCM system of record being a primary vendor to a business. What are the things that a business cannot really exist without? Right? For a tech business, that may be your cloud services, AWS, GCP, Microsoft Azure, or whoever is hosting your, kind of data centers in the cloud. The other thing may be, your main bank, to be able to facilitate transactions and, things like that. Then immediately, right? It is your payroll and HCM vendor, because without that, you are not going to be able to do anything. You cannot hire, another employee. You cannot hire contractors. You cannot do anything compliantly or grow your business without this HCM software. So building a primary vendor means that it comes with a lot of responsibilities, right? It means that what you do has to be extremely accurate. Right, it has to be something that is up to the standards that has been set, not just by the government, but by just your existing client set itself. But then, more importantly, it has to navigate all of the changes that affects every human being on this planet. Right. So when you look at what happened during COVID, it accelerated this kind of distributed nature of businesses. Right, and even if you are, let's say, a relatively small company in the US, even if you do not have an international workforce, you may have people today that are in multiple states, right? We see 10% companies that have people in 6 different states all the time. And what that means is there's just so much more complexity in running a business of any size. But then especially, as you grow, as you become mid-market enterprise, that complexity just kind of increases by many, many, many magnitudes. You now have added complexity of handling different kind of time zones with their own, workforce. You have to handle different kinds of state, local, kind of municipal registrations. You have to keep up with all the laws that are changing. I mean, there has been 3 new rulings from FLSA that just came out in the first, kind of 3 months of this year, right? So somebody needs to be always kind of keeping up with these changes and making sure that it does not disrupt the other aspects of your business. Right. So the problem has just become more and more complex over time, which is why, I think building Niural has been such a rewarding component of my, I guess overall entrepreneurial journey and kind of the biggest feather in my cap, because it is so intricately connected to how human beings are taken care of.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And also too, you pretty much already kind of hit the nail on the head with how your system kind of solves a lot of the challenges, right? Your HR partners are facing a lot of times. We're so engulfed in just the day-to-day employee questions, minor stuff getting pulled in bunch of different meetings. So if a new law comes out, and it's very critical for us to know that. But if for some reason we miss it because we're so engulfed in the day-to-day and didn't get a notification, don't have time to sit and read, it is very important for a platform to at least notify us. And a lot of times in these seats, we're really focused on that because there are some HR people that don't want anything to do with payroll and tax laws, right? And just the opposite, there's payroll people that never want to fire anyone and just want to stay in their bubble, So it's different people's personalities and what they prefer to do. So that is really critical and important. I'm glad that your system has definitely, figured it out. I feel like your time spent in the tech space has been just very beneficial to lead you up to this point because you're essentially solving all the problems. You know of all the problems already. You've been through it. That's your network as well. So now your system is solving this specific problem and really just want to get the word out about that, right? So that everyone knows, hey, look, there's not just these 1 or 2 heavy honchos that we're used to, right? There's other platforms that are here with the times, right? Willing and able to just make sure that your one platform that everyone is using goes across all departments, from legal to accounting to HR, payroll, so that everyone can have some type of, satisfactory experience at the end.
Yes.
Another question I wanted to ask, I know that there's been going into startups. So we're talking about women in the tech space and handling startups. Usually there could be challenges when you're scaling it, right? And I just want to try to understand what your strategies, have been that you've implemented as you've been on this journey, and how you've helped scale, all of your, even if it's not just Niural, but all of your platforms along the way.
That's a great question. And building any kind of business is hard, right? And especially when you scale and when you scale massively, very quickly, there's a lot of different kind of growing pains that come with it. So over time, obviously, having, built all of these successful businesses and applying those lessons to Niural, I think of, scalability in mostly two components, right? One is your technology component. How do you initially, right? Like from the beginning, when you were starting out your company and setting the initial infrastructure for how your business operates, how have you thought about scalability from the very beginning, right? So rather than for Niural, there's a lot of kind of new age tech companies that started out just serving SMBs, for example, right? We started serving enterprises from the very beginning. And the reason behind that is when you build for let's say 10 people or 25% companies, then your infrastructure is limited and is not scalable beyond that because you're just building for the kind of clients that you represent, right? Versus I knew from the very beginning that this is a company that I want to make available and applicable to whether you are a 2-person company or a 20,000 person company, right? So from the get-go, all of the infrastructure and all of the data models, how our front end, back end, how our infrastructure, how our cloud architecture works, all of that is built with this idea of this needs to scale, and it needs to scale quickly from be able to go from 2 to 20,000 very, very quickly. So that tech component scalability, I think, needs to happen very much at the core and when you're initially building it, because later on, if you try to build it, it's very, very hard. And that's why a lot of our competitors kind of fall into that, chaos, right? Like they are stuck in one kind of limbo when it comes to the kinds of clients that they can serve versus we can serve any kind of client. So that's number one. The second, and I think an equally important component, is how you scale your people operations, right? How do you, especially in a distributed environment, how do you set up teams that can be scalable and that can be extremely productive, and you have the ability, the ammunition to be able to just increase the activity on that scalability from a people perspective. So I always think about building very independent kind of single-threaded teams. Meaning, if somebody is based in, let's say, a certain locale, right? We are a distributed company, but we are locally distributed, meaning in all of the different places, we have localized headquarters where people can come in, whether in a hybrid setting or on a full-time office setting. But they can come in and they can, interact with other folks in an office, and they can, kind of get some of that camaraderie built. And then also in terms of how the product is scaled, we have built teams that have a lot of independence in the products that are given, right? So for example, a team may have, engineers, product designer, product manager, QA. So those kinds of units that are working on one independent problem at a time. So they feel like they're owners of the product rather than everybody being kind of too many cooks in the kitchen across multiple different products, right? So that gives you this ability to just kind of one, build very, very quickly, which is a very, very key skill set that my team has, and a very significant differentiator of how Niural is built versus our competitors. We're able to just, build very, very quickly. We're able to iterate extremely quickly, and we're also able to customize quickly because of these, kind of scalability of teams. So that's, for each company, it's going to be different. For us, because we're a tech-first platform, we think of it as tech plus people. For others, it may be, how do you create teams that that can, kind of take ownership over their tasks. And, once somebody can once somebody feels like, that sense of purpose and sense of ownership, that scalability, I think, comes within.
No, it's perfect. I don't know how many times in my career, there's been an update in a system and then that's messed up a couple of other things. And it takes, weeks sometimes for like a script to be ran or something to, get done and get fixed. And you just don't have that time in payroll. Like you really just don't, especially if it's a payroll Monday, you're already stressing out on Sunday about it. And so to walk into that is really hard. So really glad to hear that your system, you're already on top of it, right? And your system essentially solves for those problems. So kudos, because I know everyone that's listening in is going to be so happy about that. It's always like a nightmare when you run across that. So since with your technology, experience, I wanted to get your opinion briefly on how you feel like tech will kind of evolve in the HR space in the next couple of years. I know that things are always ever changing, so it could be totally different today than it's going to be this afternoon or tomorrow. But just curious on any like insight you might have for that when it comes to tech and HR.
I think HR is obviously going to be one of the, industries that is going to be the most transformed by AI. Like there's no denying that AI is, kind of creating this new industrial revolution. Right. But that said, a lot of people tend to really think about, oh my God, AI is coming and taking our jobs. Now, that may be true for certain kinds of jobs, but any job that requires, deterministic thinking, any job that requires, empathy, any job that requires creativity, I think those things tend to be more or less kind of immune to AI in the sense that AI can supplement and help them do their work, but it's not a direct replacement, right? So, and HR is obviously one of those fields where empathy, creativity, leadership is always going to be prioritized as a skill set over something like, being able to solve a math problem. Right. In that context, the way I think about how this ecosystem changes is obviously there's going to be a lot more new regulations, right? Right now, regulators don't even know how to deal with or how to think about the extent of AI being used and how it transforms, every rule that has been established up until now. Let me give you a quick example. What's going to happen when there's AI agents that come and replace, let's say, a marketer's job? Right? Today, there's a human being, let's say, a marketing person in Ohio, and Ohio gets income taxes and other associated taxes when there's a human being in Ohio working from that location, right? So then what happens when there is an AI agent that replaces that job? How will Ohio think about the lost revenues? How will they think about actually figuring out what to do to upskill the other folks that are in Ohio whose jobs have been displaced? By the way, Ohio is just, a token name here, but it could be any place, any country, any jurisdiction. So things like that, I don't think it has even come into, kind of mainstream dialogue yet because people have not fully fathomed how all of these things are going to change, right? And so I foresee a future in which there's just going to be a lot of different iterative changes over time, right? Like one change will be made and then we'll get to know the impact of it, good or bad, very quickly. And then there's going to be additional changes, and those changes are going to happen in a way that the government and all of the kind of interested bureaucratic parties are going to want to essentially figure out how can we kind of preserve the human, how can we take care of the human beings that are being impacted by it. Those things I think are going to really materially shift the dialogues and, the changes that everybody is kind of perceiving in the system. Now, in terms of how HR folks and leaders deal with it, I think being AI literate is super important, right? And when I say AI literate, I mean understanding just what are the things that AI can truly be used for, which tends to be more probabilistic stuff, right? Like, the way an AI model works, and especially the way these LLMs work, is they only know if you give them a word, they work by predicting what is the next word that comes after it. right? Which is why you see in ChatGPT, like, you see one word being streamed after another being streamed. That's like the mechanism in which it works. So none of it is deterministic. It doesn't always know what has to come after, right? Like, and that is true for language generation. That is true for the way AI operates in general. So for very, very important tasks that have to be deterministic, have to be 100% accurate, like HR, like taking care of people, like taking care of their livelihood, being able to pay them, money matters, things like that, the ecosystem that we live in, that is a lot more deterministic. So then being very aware of how can AI impact deterministic worlds is, I think, going to be really, really crucial for HR leaders everywhere to think about.
Yeah, perfect. Look, you see it when you're texting, right? How many times does it mix up your words sometimes, or sometimes it's really helpful. So that is, that's great to hear. I think from an HR stance, it's definitely something that we need to start grasping and start understanding. And I would say just like raising our hand, right? When, hey, look, are we going to try to do a chat bot on our own internally, right? And just getting back on that back end configuration and helping with that, so that when that does take off, like you're now still needed, right, to still answer questions or add that in. So all good things that I can say are, coming. It's just, of course, the unknown that I think just scares people in general, which is natural for us.
Absolutely. I tend to think of, the way AI affects the entire workplace, right? Regardless of where you are, where you're based, what country, what locale. A multi-agent future is definitely there, meaning there's going to be multiple AI agents that are going to be doing several different kinds of work for you. And there's going to be AI workers working alongside human workers, right? So then the problem becomes more about what are the permissions that the AI worker has versus something that a human worker would, right? What are the things that we delegate to AI agents versus the things that we reserve for human workers? Part of that is, Neural is definitely an agentic AI platform that helps you facilitate all sorts of things that you need to do in the payroll and HR space, but it is built with a human being at the front, at the center of everything that we do, right? So we contemplate human beings working with additional multiple agents that Neural provides, but those agents are always going to be working based on the instructions that the human workers is delegating to them rather than replacing the human worker. I think that is the future in which every person becomes 100x more productive, right? So that, that brain capital that I was telling you about, that brain capital becomes even more powerful. It becomes the most important resource once again for the business, because you always need somebody to be creating these kinds of, overseeing the tasks of AI agents everywhere. Ultimately, AI is a piece of technology, and any piece of technology needs iteration. It can make errors. It goes through hallucinations, things like that. So you always need human supervision there, right? So that's the world that I think we're going to see, and we have to be prepared for how to engage with that world.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I was at a conference a couple months back, and one of the speakers asked everyone, who's a coder? And it was an HR conversation, and no one raised their hand. He was like, we're all coders, raise your hand. And then he started giving examples. So it's really funny. So specifically what you were speaking on is very, very accurate too. So well, let's get into my final question that I wanted. So any other women trying to get into this tech space, trying to do a startup, do you have any advice, any lessons learned along the way that you can share us, and we can probably hopefully skip over? But most importantly, more so advice that you would give them, because obviously, especially in the tech space, it's essentially male dominated. Most things are male dominated, and just how anything you overcame, just any advice you can give anyone out there, including myself, on how to kind of get through certain battles and make sure that we're all still making an impact. I think that's my biggest thing personally, is just remaining impactful regardless of whatever happens, but then also, how to get through the tough startup phase.
I think it is more of a psychological thing, about being a woman. We tend to be more cautious, right? We tend to be more protective. We tend to be someone who wants to just be more prepared for anything that we jump onto, right? Like there's studies that have been done all over, put somebody with like equivalent skill set and equivalent amount of information given. And if you were to ask a man, how much are they experts in something versus asking a woman tend to kind of really doubt themselves, right? Even if they know more, right? Versus men tend to really feel like, no, yes, I got it. Even if they have 40% of knowledge and women have 80% knowledge, women tend to be more dubious about their own skill sets versus men. And that's more psychological. I think obviously every person operates differently. So it's on a spectrum. But I think the most important thing about female entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs out there that I have learned over time is you are never going to know everything. There's never a scenario in which 100% of I know everything and I have a backup plan for everything and all of that. That setup does not work when you're working on creating something new. And the immediate fact that you're creating something new means that nobody knows. And you're probably the only expert in what you're trying to build, right? So take the leap. Right. I think that's the number one advice that, I'd give, because I've seen way too many really, really amazing, really, really capable women really shy away from becoming a founder or, kind of thinking big about what they're trying to build, because they try to just repeatedly question themselves out of taking that leap. Right. So that is obviously number one. And then second, be audacious in terms of what you can achieve, because you are capable of more than you think you are. Once again, that psychological component really, I think, limits a lot of women into thinking that, they have a ceiling. But I think that ceiling, maybe there is a ceiling based on what business you're building and whatnot, but that ceiling is almost always much higher than you think it is.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks so much for that. Because I would say you're right. It is really psychological, and just a normal day to day of what's expected between a man and a woman can always get in the way too, especially depending upon how someone is raised. So that's great feedback. Thank you so much, Nami, for being on. I just really appreciate all your insight and just really love your platform, Niural, that you're doing. All of the connections, you're eliminating a lot of the integrations, right? And just internally, a lot of people don't realize the battle that, HR and payroll professionals face when we have to be in the meeting with everybody. Yes. And if HR payroll is left out, it's very harsh if there's a big change that's happening. So your system definitely solves for that. So to anyone out there, definitely going to leave the link to her platform. She'll be, of course, attached to this post. So feel free to follow her, reach out to her, look at the website as well, and see if that's something that you want to explore. She has really good salespeople as well on her side. So definitely reach out if you need, any type of support. If you also want to connect with me and ask me any questions, I have plenty of breakdowns and can show you how well it works. So thank you so much, Nami, for being on. Next up, next episode, we'll definitely be kind of taking a more deeper dive into the FTC's ban on the non-competes, just to kind of get some opinion on that. So not more, juicy, interesting stuff coming up. But thank you again, Nami, for being on. We will absolutely stay connected. Definitely we'll see your next journey on this one. I'm sure you have a 4th or 5th or 6th startup coming years down the line. So we'll be having you on some future episodes if you're willing to join. But thanks again for joining us.
Of course, it was a true pleasure. Thank you for having me.